using infinite banking while buying investments. I want to understand your process.
I'll tell you from my perspective as an investor, the number one thing that a lot of people that look into infinite banking will say, yeah, but look at these first few years in whole life insurance. It's a net cost. Why wouldn't I just invest my money? Okay, well, that's cool. I'm glad you got the offense figured out. But what about the defense? And more importantly, is like, how do we design this in a way that even as an investor would say, that makes sense?
Let's dive into the nuts and bolts on how this thing works.
Here's how I use it with real estate investing, for example. Well, let's just say that I had $50,000 for a down payment. Let's just assume that maybe my cash on cash is only 4%. So that means I'm only earning $200 a month. As we mentioned before, if this was at 6% that we're borrowing, we got $3,000. Well, guess what? I'm only earning. So I show people, of course, if I borrow that $50,000 from the policy right here, right? I have not cashed out. So let's just assume that my policy have $100,000. Well, if I borrow from it and $100,000 is still earning tax-free dividends, it's compounding interest. But here, this loan that I got that I was able to invest here is at simple interest. As long as a lot of times people are worried, they're like, yeah, but I'm paying principal and interest. Well, some companies will say when you pay back the loan, you pay only to principal. So in some ways, you can actually pay it down faster than a traditional loan.
Do you write off the interest off your taxes?
Not with all my investments. It has to be something that
I don't get excited about something like this.
I made that mistake in 2006, 2007, and that didn't go so great.
So well. A question that you could ask yourself is, if there was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, would you be able to say yes to that? Chris Miles, welcome to Tennessee.
Hey, thank you.
You were on my show, was it almost 2 years ago? And we were in Hawaii and we were just chopping it up, and you're talking about infinite banking, alternative investments. It did quite well. We got a lot of great feedback from it. What I would love to do in this, you could say part 2, is really dive into how you use infinite banking or life insurance. I know we both have our opinions about how infinite banking has been used, but like how you use life insurance to invest in other alternative assets. How the process works from funding your life insurance to taking loans to finding other deals, vetting those deals, investing in those deals, and then how the actual cash flow works when you start getting those deals, how you pay off insurance loans. And again, like for those of you that it's your first time watching this might not be the very first episode that you should watch. We have a ton of content that's big picture, including our first episode that we'll link down below. But one of the things that we've gotten a ton of feedback on, we're trying to honor, is people want to go like the 2.0. They want to go deeper, and they want popular guests to come back on and show exactly how they do things. And so earlier, I don't know when this will come out, but I had Mr. Burr here, and we were walking through the math of buying cars and kind of going back and forth. It was really helpful drawing because I got to share kind of my thesis on, things that I disagreed with what he said, but we both got to kind of like map what it looked like. And so, if anyone knows me, they know I love whiteboards. And so this is like the best version of being able to do that. But before we jump in, how are you doing? What's been new since we've chopped it up?
Well, let's see. We just released our book, The Work Optional Blueprint.
I love it.
Just came out on Amazon and everything. And
we'll have the link down below definitely want to help support that out.
Yeah, absolutely. So have the launch party and everything going on too. So that's been fun. That I never actually ever thought I would write a book. I mean, maybe I knew that at some point I would have to, and people would ask me to, but I absolutely hate writing.
Yeah, same.
Absolutely hate it. I mean, even my college thesis, right, that I had written, and I did one on college student stress, for my major, and I went to all these different universities and sampled all the different populations and stuff and put it all in, and I wrote out this huge thesis that ended up being a whopping 38 pages. Like that was it. And so trying to write a book that at least has some meat to it, that was hard. And fortunately, with the I don't know if you call it the invention of it, but with the progress of AI and everything else, I was able to take some of my content and get it there to start.
Right.
And then I can try to build off of that and build in the stories and everything else and the examples. And next thing I know, I have this 200 plus page book, although my wife read it in a couple hours.
That's a compliment, by the way.
The
best compliment that I was given is someone read my book and they're like, yeah, I feel like a fourth grader could read this. And I'm like, that's exactly why people are enjoying it, because we're trying to take complicated things and making them simple.
Right.
Which that tells me if someone can read it fast, it's a good read, but it's an easy to understand, which is a form of intelligence, by the way, is making complicated things simple.
Exactly. Well, it's kind of interesting though with my wife. I can't remember if I shared on the last interview we did, but my wife actually was the first approved Dave Ramsey instructor in the state of Utah. And for her infinite banking, she's like, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. Why would you buy that? That's just ridiculous. Why not just buy term and invest the rest? Right? That was her thing. Well, she went through the book and she went through, and of course she was a journalism major and things like that. And even in the military, she did a little bit of journalism stuff. And she said, like I did have to slow down on the infinite banking section. She's like, but I've got a whole bunch of questions here. She had this whole Post-it note full of questions. And then one of her first questions was, why didn't you tell me about this sooner?
Wow.
Like, why didn't you have my girls set this up when they were younger even, so we could actually have more money? Because I was looking for a place to put it besides the bank. This looks way better. I said, well, it's because you poo-pooed all over it. You pretty much said it was a stupid thing or you just didn't get it. She's like, yeah, but now I get it. And
Wow.
and that was like, okay, that's a good testament to the book that at least that small section, even though it's not all about infinite banking, still that small section got her intrigued enough to say, oh, now I kind of see how this plays out. Now I've been hearing you from the office, talking about this all the time. Now it makes more sense how this all works together.
And you're talking about how people can store money into life insurance and then how they can use it to buy other investments.
Correct.
What's the
Yeah.
thesis of the book?
So the thesis is, how do you become work optional, right? Work optional means, I hate the word retirement because so many people don't want to retire. I've tried it twice and it was the most depressing time of my life. So every time it's more of having enough passive income coming in that you work because you want to, not because you have to. Like your bills are paid, but you know that now you work, you show up, it's all by choice, not because out of survival or necessity.
And obviously, everyone should go buy the book. If you buy the book, read it, and if you read it, review it because that really helps authors out.
Absolutely.
If someone wasn't going to do that and they just wanted like the ChatGPT Cliff Notes, what is the framework on 200 pages? If you had to summarize it in a few sentences.
Yeah, if I make it really simple, the three main categories we talk about is how to get lean, get liquid, and get out.
Get lean, get liquid, and get out.
Yep. So get lean means be a wise steward of your money, right? It doesn't mean live on rice and beans, cut out that latte, like David Bach would say. It's more about how do we be a wise steward of our money? Prioritize the things we're going to spend money on, but the things that aren't important to us, cut that, right? And how do we free up cash flow? How do we save money on taxes? How do we pay off debt more creatively using our cash flow index method and things like that? And then, of course, we talk about get liquid. Get liquid means have cash available, have it in your possession versus locking it away in prison, like your 401ks and IRAs where you can't touch them anyways. Especially if you work for a job or a company with a 401k, you have to quit or get fired just to access that money. That's not right. Or lock your money into equity in a house that you can't pull out because the only time you can get to your money is when you don't need the money, right?
Yeah. But banks love lending money to people that don't need it. But they hate lending money to people that actually need it.
Exactly. So that's what I mean by get liquid is get that money in your possession. Don't lock it away. Get in your possession and then get that money out into investments that do pay you passive income that allow you to become work optional faster than saving for decades, hoping and praying that the market just smiles on you the right way, that you can actually have some sort of retirement down the road.
Now, I get hit up all the time with investments. I'm sure you do as well. How do you go about vetting investments? Because that is like, it sounds so great. Your framework's amazing until an underlying investment goes south.
That's right.
How do you go about vetting deals?
Yeah. The best way is, sadly, to lose a lot of money investing.
That will sell 0 copies. How to lose a ton of money.
That might be my next book. It's like 2 pages. Like, don't do this, right? No, I mean, definitely from that experience I've gained over the last, 20 plus years doing real estate investing, for example. And even like I was a stock trader. I mean, don't think I was only real estate. I started out as a traditional financial advisor. I was also a stock trader, taught people how to trade stocks and options. I was all in on the stock market and Wall Street, and then went away from that to now anti-Wall Street. And the reason is because when you're looking at a deal, say like it's something that is alternative space, right? Like something in real estate. The first thing I look at is not necessarily just what the investment is, but who is doing the investment, who's in charge of it. Because it's kind of like they talk about the horse and the jockey, right? If the investment were the horse, you're also betting on the jockey, who's obviously riding that horse, the operator. And so I look at the operator first. For example, somebody had shown me today that said, hey, here's a group that does this kind of stuff. And it almost sounded like another company like Tardis. In fact, they were some of their own clients that went and created their own company. They're like, yeah, we do lending, we do this, and we invest your money and all this stuff, right? And I was like, well, that's great, but they've been around since 2020. Like, there's no track record there. They don't even know what they're doing. It's a blind leading the blind. So when I look for operators, I look for the ones that aren't the best marketers necessarily. In fact, in many cases, the best marketers are the biggest charlatans, right?
That's really interesting, actually. I tend to agree with you is someone's really, really good at marketing. A
Hmm.
lot of times they can make up for their bad behaviors in other areas because they're a
Yeah,
good marketer, and usually that's a red flag when it comes to investing.
absolutely. Like I look for the most boring investors, like the ones that just do it day in, day out, have done it probably for at least 15 years. I like to see full market cycle so that if even if they experience stress, they found a way through it. Even if they lost money in some of their deals, they learn from it so that they could be better prepared the next time. And so I look for that. I look for really experience. I look for what have they done? Are they still in the same place? I've seen people pivot from real estate to oil, for example. Well, that's great. And then one of them we reached out and says, "Hey, maybe you should do something with us." I said, "Reach back out to me in 2035 and
Oh,
we'll talk again."
yeah, yeah.
Like just, I need you to bang your knees and let other people be your guinea pig, or your own money be your guinea pig than my own money. And that goes even for my clients too. When they always say, "Hey, who do you use? Who do you invest with?" Right? They want to know. It's like, well, I'm not going to send you to some person that hasn't done this before, hasn't done it for very long. So that's the biggest thing I do. And then, yes, I do look at the investment. Is this something that's actually sustainable? Yeah. I don't know if you've seen some of these lately. I've seen several where people are like, "Yeah, I'm making 5% a month."
Yeah,
It's
anytime someone says that, I mean, I wouldn't even have them on the show. I would feel
right.
so uncomfortable. And by the way, this is not investment advice, not insurance
Hmm.
advice, not tax advice. So we could say whatever we want,
Right.
and I wanna do my best to make sure that I'm not including something that's, like, totally,
Uh huh.
like, like, I will say even if I disagree with someone, I'll be like, I wanna be able to, like, call them out or challenge them
Yeah.
because it's so easy to, like, wanna throw our money in things that are, like, 5%. You look at a compound interest calculator, and
Yeah.
that's incredible. The problem is it's just not gonna work long term.
Right.
I mean, I don't wanna be that guy because maybe there's some people that can make it work in a short period of time, but
Hmm.
if it was that good, there'd be unlimited money going to it, and
Uh
then
huh.
you as your little investor would get squeezed out, I would imagine, but
Oh yeah.
what is the 5%? The whole deal?
Yeah, like, it's sometimes it's like sometimes they're stock traders, right? They'll say, "Oh, with options trading, I can make you 5% a month, 10% a month." And they'll say it's not guaranteed, but they still say, "Yeah, but my track record's been great for the last couple of years." And it's almost always been like 3, 4 years. There's usually not something really before it that's verified.
Mm,
And that bothers me because, like you said, you do the math. I mean, just run the math on, say somebody start with 100 grand. Let's just say these people are so good because obviously if they're paying you 5% a month, let's just say that's 60% a year. Well, 60% a year means that assumes they make more than 60% a year.
yep,
Do the math. Take 100 grand
yep,
and say 65%. Let's just say they only take a small cut. So like you run those numbers and you realize after just 20 years, these people should be on the richest billionaires list, right? I mean, there was even, I ran one was 100,000 and somebody had claimed they were making, 100% a year, like on their match of the 401k. I said, well, you're not making a true 100% on your 401k match, even when you get the 100%. It's not a compounded 100%. If it were, you would be a quadrillionaire in 20 years. And there's no way you're richer than Bezos because, they
you
interview you
figured out.
like, what'd you do? Like the School of Hard Knocks guy.
Yeah,
Hell, how'd you become a multi-quadrillionaire? I saved in my 401k, right?
yeah,
It's like the same thing. Like, yeah, I invest in the stock market. You don't see those people because it just doesn't happen. I know because I met those guys that were the good stock traders. Long term, maybe 20, 25% a year was what you could hope for.
mhm,
They always shine on the month when they made like,
exactly,
30%,
yeah,
50% that one month, right? And you think, oh, that's going to be every month. They
yeah.
extrapolate it and that doesn't work.
I wrote this as just like a free thought. I was on the airplane,
Hmm.
and I try to keep good notes of some ideas for future posts, and I put this: a new investor looks at potential growth rate, really understands the concept of compounding, smiley face.
Hmm.
Intermediate investor trying to maximize growth while reducing risk in the process. Experienced investor, primary focus on reducing risk over getting high returns. Getting market returns with taking less risk is their goal. They
Yeah.
understand the power of long-term compounding as well. Smiley face. And then Warren Buffett's two rules to investing:
Hmm.
don't lose money. Rule number one, and then rule number two is never forget rule number one. And
Exactly.
so it's just a good reminder of like, yeah, are there better rates of return out there? Yes,
Mhm.
but experienced people that have been around the block is really factoring in risk, not just as a
Yeah.
check mark, but they're like looking at the deal first and foremost through risk. And their goal is not necessarily to get a higher return,
Mhm.
but if they can get the same return or a little bit higher, with also factoring in that risk adjusted, like they're in a good place. I try to remind
Yeah.
myself that because even myself, I'm always looking for like that. I find myself default wanting to be that intermediate investor that's like
Hmm.
saying what I need to say, but I'm really trying to like go for the moon.
Uh-huh.
And I just need to remind myself like the power of compounding over time with not losing your money is a really powerful thing.
Absolutely. It's so much harder. I mean, and it's always I run into people all the time where they get their first 10,000, 20,000, and then they want to go invest. And I share this with one of our 15-year-olds, right? That we got like 8 kids,
Love it.
almost all of them are teenagers right now, which is awesome and not awesome depending on the time of the month, especially with all these girls, right? But with one of them, like she's definitely more investment, more minded. And I played this Charlie Munger clip, like, or really it was like a 20-minute long like audio interview that they did. And a lot of it was about don't even invest until you have at least $100,000, which is the same thing I'm going to teach my clients is like, until you have at least $150,000, don't even worry about investing because if you have 10,000, you say, what do I do with it? It's like, well, let's just say that you can make a good 10% off that money. You make a whopping $1,000 a year. That's not going to move the needle to go from 10,000 to 11,000 bucks. That whole miracle of compounding interest is a joke. But if you can show up better as a value creator in your job, in your business, and you focus on that and try to drive up income while not trying to drive up your expenses, let's just say you get an extra 5,000, 10,000, you're going to move the needle way faster, get to that 100,000 faster, and then you can start to get to a point of critical mass where you start to build that up better and better. But again, so many people are like, I got money. And that's congratulations. You have money now. That's good. Keep going.
It's interesting. You're going back to your 3 rules.
Yeah.
What a lot of people do when they first make money is they get not liquid. They're like,
Yes.
I'm starting to make money. Let me lock up my money
Uh-huh.
and get to where I like where I am from the very beginning. And it's
Yeah.
I love talking to you because we have very similar philosophies. And it's because we've learned from a lot of the same people. We've rubbed
Right.
shoulders with a lot of the same people. Anything else you want to say before we start getting into the fun stuff, the case studies on how
Yeah.
you flow money?
I would just say this is, it is tough because there's so much out there. And the truth is that most of the stuff I see that come across my table and are not really investments, they're gambles.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing you have to understand is, are you an investor or are you a gambler? And investors, like you said, which is really great. The experienced investors say, how can I lessen my risk and still get great returns? But I want a return of my money first and foremost, as well as get a return on my money. Gamblers say high risk creates high returns.
Mm-hmm.
They believe that somehow a higher chance of losing equals a higher chance of winning. And that doesn't equate. Those two do not equal each other, right? Higher chance of losing is a higher chance of losing. If you have a higher chance of loss or risk, that means you will have a much higher chance of losing and you will lose. And that's what happens. People just think, oh, I'm just going to swing for the fences and they strike out every time rather than focus on how do I get base hits?
Mm-hmm.
How do I make sure that I keep making money off my money? And you'll make way more than these people that are just out there gambling. They think they're investors. They'll claim they're investors. They'll buy their Bitcoin.
They have good months.
They have their good months, right?
Yep.
They think they're great investors because they have money in a stock market that goes up whether they blink or not, like it just keeps going without them. Like that didn't make them brilliant. They just rode a wave.
Yep.
If you can't control the return, you're not a good investor. You don't know what you're doing. You're literally just riding waves. Yeah. And the problem is the last 16 years, really people that are under the age of 40 have no clue what it's like to lose money because it's been an everything bubble, especially the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. And so people have just been lulled away into this security, like all is well in Camelot. Well, I'm here to tell you, it's not all is well in Camelot. Like there's a big, big correction coming. And the people that are now gambling the most, they have no cash on hand, right? They're not liquid. They have all their money. They have it out, but they have them out in things that are high risk. They're going to find that there's a correction and they're going to lose a lot of money and they're going to find themselves set back years, even decades worse than what they thought they were going to be.
On that note, let's dive into infinite banking, using infinite banking while buying investments. I want to understand your process. So you don't have to share your numbers, but I would love to, like, if we were sitting on a whiteboard and being like, okay, Caleb, I want to walk you through exactly what I do or how I teach clients, how they fund life insurance policies, how they look for investments, the philosophy, the frameworks. I'll interrupt you plenty of times, but I really would love to take time to actually sketch this out.
Yeah. So let me talk about conceptually, and then we'll sketch it out a little bit too. First and foremost, my philosophy has changed over the years a little bit, or maybe more with like a market conditions. I'm all about being liquid, right? As I've been saying, right? Having cash in your control. And so I've been having people more move their money away from the banks, unbanking themselves, getting away from what could be high risk. Because every time there's a recession, it's usually the bank's fault. It's always some financial institution that's collapsing or something's going wrong that creates some sort of recession. And I feel like that's the same way. We keep hearing like little things like, remember a couple years ago we had Signature Bank and some of those banks start to fail. And then it's like, it stopped. Nothing happened. And then just recently we had regional banks and all of a sudden talking about these, really they were lending out money to people that were defrauding them. Even like Zion's Bank, which is a huge bank, regional bank, and some others too, that were like losing, that were having to write it off on their books. Do we really think that's over? Or are we just seeing just the evidence of something beginning? And so I'm not that I'm opposed to using banks. I'll still use banks, especially for money I can get to quickly. But this is where I'm using my life insurance even more because I can store my money. It's safe. It's guaranteed. It's going to make more than I'm going to make in the bank. It's tax free. And in most states, protected from lawsuits and creditors, 100%. So why wouldn't I have more of my money there? So I'm starting to change my view of, hey, let's get at least a good baseline inside of there that I'm not always using to flush money in and out, whether you're trying to use it for, use it for debt purposes or use it for investing. I actually want to build that up more. And I'll even use the first few years where I'm just using my emergency fund to fund it for those first few years, rather than just trying to dump cash in or something like that. Like some people will teach, like, yeah, throw all your money in. No, let's do it in a wise way that minimize the costs and everything and the drag on the policy and let it grow faster. But then by the time I am getting to the point where I can invest, now it's already paying for itself. Now it's growing by more than what I put in. Because I'll tell you from my perspective as an investor, the number one thing that I know that it's not just me, but a lot of people that look into infinite banking will say, yeah, but look at these first few years in whole life insurance. It's a net cost. Why would I just invest my money? Besides, I've got term insurance. I don't really need it. I don't even care about the death benefit. Even if they have a family, like I don't care, right? I'll just get rich. Okay, well, that's cool. Great. I'm glad you got the offense figured out. But what about the defense? And more importantly, is like, how do we design this in a way that even as an investor would say, that makes sense? And that's what I realized, like those 2 years of net cost or 3 years, whatever it might be for you. Well, it wouldn't be great if you used your emergency fund to go in there and use that. So let's just say that your emergency fund, which you have for at least 6 months of your expenses. If you're an entrepreneur, I would say at least 12 months, especially lately. And actually, not even if you're an entrepreneur, if you're somebody who has a high salary, like middle level, management type position, we've had a lot of people in the tech space of our clients get laid off, and they've been laid off for 6-12 months at least, and no opportunities in sight.
And the difference between 12-month emergency versus like a 6 months could be massive when it comes to job opportunity you get. Because if someone has no money, they're going to be forced to take the next newest gig because they need to say yes to that. But if you're able to be a little bit more selective, that 0% that you're making on your emergency fund could get you a way larger rate of return because it just allows you to be a little bit more patient. It's a volatility buffer.
Yeah.
It's a volatility buffer in life. But yeah, I so you're saying 6 months to a year, and personally, do you even have more than a year?
Oh yeah, personally I do.
Okay,
for sure. Yeah,
what do you think if you had to if you had to be like, guys, just trust me? According to Chris Miles, like as an entrepreneur, how much volatility or emergency fund would you recommend someone if they wanted to just create an optimal for their wealth? Because obviously there's an opportunity cost. If you have 20 years of emergency fund, there's an opportunity cost of that not earning.
Yeah.
But what do you think is the ideal scenario if you had to if you could snap your fingers and
as a business owner?
Yeah, as a business owner.
I would say minimum at least 2 months of operating expenses in your business.
Okay.
And then 12 months at home of personal expenses. So if your expenses are say $10,000 a month, you want to have at least $120,000 a month at home. And if you say that maybe your expenses in the business are $40,000 a month, you want at least $80,000 to $100,000 in the business. Don't let it drop below that.
Okay. And then do you recommend anything more if someone's got more, or do you think after? What do you think is an ideal after what would you say you are shooting for?
For me personally, personally at home, we actually aim for 400,000 that we have as the baseline.
Okay.
And it's really based on more comfort than just a calculation. In that case, there's an emotional reason too. More for my wife than it is for me, but that's kind of the number we agreed upon.
Yeah.
And so for me, that would cover well more than a year
of
expenses and everything else. However, I'm even building more beyond that. because I'm also doing like what Warren Buffett's been doing, right? Which Warren Buffett now has 30% of all of his Berkshire Hathaway money sitting in cash,
Interesting. Wow.
which, yeah, we'll have to talk about another point of how he's using life insurance companies for that too. But yeah, he's got really 347 billion sitting in cash right now. Never in history of Berkshire Hathaway have they had that much cash. But again, he's looking at it saying, no, we've got to have the cash available. He was cashing out his Apple stocks in the last 2 years, Bank of America, all the stuff that people are saying, go buy more of this. He's been selling, right? And that's the thing, because people will look at Warren Buffett and say, oh, you're an idiot. Like, you're just old. You're antiquated with today's world, especially with the digital assets and the AI. You just don't get it, right? But understand, he's an investor. I guarantee he studied that probably more than most people say you don't get it.
Right.
And he's even saying, hey, with all the valuation in the stock market right now, it's ridiculous. It's about an all-time high based on the PE values, that price to earnings, right? If it takes you over 25 years to make back your money inside of a company, that's not a good thing, to say, oh, I'm going to make my investment back in 25 years. That's horrible. But that's exactly what Wall Street's doing right now. And so he's been cashing his chips for the last few years, building that cash more and more. Then he's been leveraging life insurance companies that's, doing float to use that money to then go and invest to buy new companies. So he's not even touching his cash. He's been using insurance companies that he has ownership in, using the money they have sitting on the sidelines, because insurance companies will keep money. They call it float, which is the money they have for insurance claims. They're just sitting there. Well, he has access, because he has ownership in those companies, to literally borrow at 0%. He's essentially doing infinite banking, using life insurance companies, the money that's sitting there,
Yeah.
and using that money. He bought into an energy company here recently, just back in October. So when you think about that, you're like, dude, the guy is even doing his own version of infinite banking.
Just next level.
Yeah.
Instead of his own policies, he's using the insurance company's balance sheet.
Yeah, he just has access to the entire insurance company. We're like,
Yeah.
we got our little cash, but he's got his little store in the billions, right?
Yeah.
And that's the cool thing, is that, he is storing up cash. He's getting ready. And I'm kind of doing the same thing. I've still been investing into things like in the real estate category. I just did an investment a few weeks ago. However, I'm also building up cash on the side to get it bigger, because I do see opportunity coming.
I think if you're a question that you could ask yourself is if there was a once in a lifetime opportunity, because there will be a few in our lifetime that are just like, this is a once in an opportunity to take advantage. Would you be able to say yes to that?
Right.
And unfortunately, so many people wouldn't be able to say absolutely. And if you're wondering, is this a once in a lifetime? It's probably not. But it's like, if there is that heck yes, whether it's in your business or just outside of your business, would you be able to say yes to that? And what I hear you saying is, whether it's Warren Buffett that has billions of dollars that he's getting ready, or whether you're someone who's just stacking chips off to the side, that's a good frame of reference. It's like long term, 30, 40 years, you don't want your money earning nothing. But over a period of time, even 10 years, creating that one decision could be a game changer. But a lot of times you won't be able to say yes, because your money's tied up with everybody else. Because a lot of times, if it's an amazing opportunity, that means a lot of people are unable to say yes, meaning there's bad things happening in the market. And another way to say this is, when the market is down and everyone's panicking and freaking out, usually that's the best time to buy opportunity.
That's right. That's what Buffett did, with Bank of America. Ironically enough, he literally was the one that bailed them out, rather than the government bailing them out. And so he bought it for dirt cheap. Was able to come back, and he made lots of money off of it. But now he's cashing his chips, waiting for the next opportunity.
It's interesting.
And I just saw this stat recently at a conference I was at, where right now the average portfolio manager only has about 1% sitting in cash in their portfolio. And a lot of really the beginning investors, same thing. I mean, how many times have we heard over the years, hey, we can't just have it sitting in cash because we're going to lose to inflation, or we can make money, or I should go buy Bitcoin. I got to do something with my money. That's the problems, that when you're not experienced, you just feel like you have to do something. You have this scarcity of time, scarcity of opportunity. The truth is that there's going to be an abundance of opportunity when nobody thinks there's opportunity, because they're going to be losing money.
New entrepreneurs, that's I see that all the time. They start making money for the first time, good money, and they feel like it's burning a hole in their pocket, and they, they read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and they're like, I get it, I need to go buy assets. And then they just deploy all their money into assets, and 5 years later, they're broke. And they're trying to do all the right things, but they're not doing their due diligence, putting their money in a bunch of things. Some things work out, some things don't, but they end up sometimes their businesses end up suffering because their businesses they're not on this like exponential curve, and then their
Hmm.
business needs help, but then they have no liquidity, so they can't even bail out the engine that got them money in the first place. It's crazy to
Yeah.
me. I see it all the time, and yeah.
Yeah, you can't act like everything's gonna be fine and that everything's always gonna be this way,
Mhm.
right? If you have this great, great months or years in your company, you got to pretend like, hey, this might come to an end at some point, or
Right.
this might change in some sort of way. I need to take some chips off the table.
Right.
And this is where I view the infinite banking, using really life insurance for that way. It's like a great war chest to build it up.
Right.
It's great for my emergency fund because at least now I'm not earning point nothing percent at the bank and
Mhm.
getting taxed on that point nothing percent. I'm earning much, much higher
Mhm.
interest, right? I'm right around 6% tax
Okay.
free.
Talk to me
I
about
love
the
that.
6% tax free.
Yeah. The
Because
dividends.
but okay, so walk through that because I want to better understand how you teach that.
Mhm.
Because I also believe that life insurance, when you factor in all the other benefits, can get you those type of rates of return. But
Yeah.
the actual rate of return, I see more at like
More like 4 or 5.
4.5%.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, you gotta be careful. I mean, because there's really the upfront costs. Once
Hmm.
you get past the upfront costs, usually you see at least a 5 to 6%, even when the gross dividend is 6% because there's insurance costs coming out. But it's usually not a whole lot different, is what I've noticed. It's those first few years that throws the numbers off the rest of your life. That
Hmm.
initial investment. And so I always tell people, like, listen, like if I have to invest a little bit up front to get a much better return down the road, and I know I'm going to get this tax haven
Hmm.
that is protected, that's going to allow me to make sure I always have that money,
Hmm.
and I would say even safer than the bank, especially safer than FDIC, which hardly has any of the reserves anyways, right? I mean, that's worth the price, you know. But if once it's in there, the cash is in there, and you got past those initial costs, yeah, it's going to earn nearly what the dividend rate is, even after those insurance costs come out. And that's one thing that I explain to people all the time is like, even if it were say 5%, when you factor in your tax rate, that's still like earning at least 7 or 8%, which, by the way, is pretty close to what the market usually averages as a real rate of return to the S&P, but you get taxed on that because there are no tax advantages in the stock
Right.
market, not naturally. You have to use Roth IRAs to finally get a tax benefit. IRAs and 401ks, I don't count them because you just get taxed down the road
Yeah,
anyways.
they're postponing.
Yeah.
I'm sure our YouTube producer Joel's not going to like that I'm going to say this, but we are working on a one sheet right now that actually can factor in internal rate of return, and then we factor in all kinds of things like taxes, fees, creditor protection, chronic
Right.
illness rider, the death benefit, and all, and factor an equivalent rate of return.
Uh-huh.
And if you want to see your own numbers, we'll have some type of link down below where you can get a time with our team to actually see what that looks like. Because I'm telling you, if you're an entrepreneurial investor,
Yeah.
really, really powerful to at least understand how this works, and very excited to like we've been working on this because I do believe it's really, really valuable to help people understand life insurance because if they
Mhm.
understand the value of it, I find that more people want to put money into it. But if they
Yeah.
just look at one or two values, it's like, oh, I don't know. But the more you understand about the asset, I just find the more you want to put money towards it. So
That's right.
with that, Chris, this has been a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Let's dive into the nuts and bolts on how this thing works. Most people have no idea where to start or how to really evaluate whole life insurance. That's why we've built the Vault. It's all of our best life insurance resources and educational tools all in one place, all for free. We have calculators, handbooks, crash course, deep dive videos on numbers. If you want to learn more, click the link in the description or tag comment below to unlock the Vault. All right, back to the video.
Yeah. Let's get away from just the savings part, right? And let's actually see how we
Let's
use it.
look at how you use infinite banking to invest in assets and then how the money flows. That's a big question we get, and there's a lot of different ways to explain it. And I'm just curious how you go about that.
Yeah. So, we've talked about this in the last episode, so I'm not going to go into it much, but there are a lot of half truths or even lies talked about with infinite banking. And no wonder, of course, people don't trust it as much. But when I look at it, again, it's like the offense, defense. You got to have a 1-2 punch, I do look at it as a defense that has a potential for an offense too. And you're right, because a lot of people say, well, why not just invest my money? Because the return, they only look at the one return of the life insurance. And you're right. And I love that's where you talk about the and concept, because it's not just whole life insurance by itself. Because if you just look at it by itself, you're like, okay, it's cool. And yeah, there's a great benefit of the cash flow side that could rival almost any plan you do, even in the stock market but you can do it with less risk, right? Because it's not just about how much you accumulate in there, it's about how much you're able to access as income
Right.
without the worry of not having that income, But here's how I use it with real estate investing, for example, or whatnot. And when I talk about real estate investing, I'm not just talking about buying that rental in your backyard, that's something in your town that's a piece of junk, where it's way overpriced. Yeah, I'm talking about like in real estate investing could be a number of things beyond just doing rentals, which by the way, when I buy a rental, I get a property manager because I don't want to deal with it. I've got one here in Memphis I've never seen before, but I've had it for 8 years. One of these days I might see it,
Just go
maybe I
swing
won't,
by, yeah.
right? You got to swing by at some point. But I also do lending, whether I lend on a specific property or I lend into a lending fund that will pay me a contractual type of return, whether it be 10, 11, 12% or more. And that's per year. I'll do things with raw land. I've had a business partnership with that that's still going. I have things with oil and gas, I get paid for mineral rights. I've got, I know I'm missing a whole bunch, apartment buildings, things like that. Although the last 3 years have sucked with apartments,
I'm aware.
But, they are making a comeback right now because now they've already had their dip where a lot of things haven't had their dip in the last while. So anyways, that's what I'm talking about here. So let's just take an example of, I just put my money to a lending fund recently. It contractually pays me 1% a month or 12% a year. Now, if I have, and actually this is exactly what it is. I just put in 50,000 with them. Now that 50,000 will kick off $500 a month. Now, most time, of course, people talk about using life insurance. It's like, cool, I use that money. And they talk about paying yourself back, which we know is not exactly true, right? We are literally being charged interest. The nice thing is when I borrow from it, it's not like I have to pay the interest payment, right? Unlike a home equity line of credit, I do. I talked to somebody today about velocity banking, and they've been using that strategy. And I said, wow, the last few years must have kind of been horrible for you. Yeah, hasn't been great. They haven't made the spread. And a lot of times people, when they hear me talk about infinite banking, think, oh, it's the same thing, right? Because if they charge you, say, 5% for the loan, but I make 10%, then I make a 5% spread. I'm like, you might make more. And here's why, right? So I show people, of course, if I borrow that 50,000 from the policy right here, right? That's the funds I get. I have not cashed out. So let's just assume that in my policy I have 100,000. Well, if I borrow from it, and everybody who's been on this channel, I know you already know this, listen to Caleb, that 100,000 is still earning tax-free dividends, right? It's compounding interest. But here, this loan that I got, that I was able to invest here is at simple interest, as long as I pay towards it. If I don't, then it compounds against me.
And what interest rate is that at?
For the loan? Let's just say that here I'll even put it high. I'll put it at 6%.
Okay.
Right? I know some are higher, some are lower. So let's just say it's at 6%. Now, of course, I'm taking that $500 a month. I'm going to apply it back to that $50,000 line of credit. Now we did that, and I'm sure you already calculated the numbers as we speak.
3,000 is the interest for the year.
Exactly.
6%.
So let's look at year one, right? So we had 3,000, but we had 6,000 in payments, bringing that down to 47,000. That loan balance. Now that means that 47,000 is at 6%, right? Whoa. Hello. There we go. 6%. There, I squeezed it in. So it's at 6%. So that means obviously we're paying less because now that 6% on that 4,700 is going to be somewhere in the ballpark of around, I don't know, 2,800.
Now you're contributing the full 6,000 back to your policy.
Correct.
3,000 is going to the interest and 3,000 is going to pay back.
Okay. Exactly.
Yep.
And depending on the insurance company, the cool thing is that a lot of times people are worried. They're like, yeah, but I'm paying principal and interest. Well, some companies will say when you pay back the loan, you pay only to principal. I mean, they'll calculate the interest throughout the year, but you're paying to principal first. So in some ways, you can actually pay it down faster than a traditional loan or line of credit.
Do you take do you write off the interest off your taxes?
Not with all my investments. It has to be something that legitimately is a write-off.
Okay.
So if you did it for business purposes, yes, then you could. I actually had somebody who was trying to tell me like, no, you can't. I talked to the CPA. He quoted this, this tax code and says you can't do that. I said, well, and I asked my CPA, I said, is this true? Because if so, I'm really mad because we've been telling everybody we could write off interest. I've been writing off interest on things that were used for business purposes. He said, of course it's allowed. Here's the code for it, He's like, the code they were quoting was one, if you only use not just a personal insurance policy, but you're using it for personal purposes.
Right.
Yes, you can't write it off because you're already getting the tax benefits.
Right.
So yeah. So in this case here, it's just a simple, fund. There are no tax benefits to it in that sense. So in that case, no, I don't write it off at all. But in this case, I really don't need to.
Right. And so just to write this out on 47,000, if we take 6%, that's $2,820 of
Yep.
interest for that next year. And so you're able to see that over time you're able to free this up. And the other thing that I just want to mention is at this time you're seeing that you're like quote unquote you're just putting all that money back into your policy,
Hmm.
but as you're paying that it's revolving, meaning now you have access in this
Right.
example of over $6,000 of capital that you can now redeploy if you wanted to.
That's right.
And in this example, I'm not saying, again, do your
Mhm.
due diligence, but this money that's in this fund, you could take that money out, I would imagine, almost at any time.
Right.
So or has some type of like 90-day liquidity. And so
Yeah.
you still have $50,000 asset somewhere,
Hmm.
and now the goal is, um, you're just whittling this thing down, but it's not like it's a traditional loan where it's like you don't really get any benefit of putting more money
Right.
towards it.
Exactly. Well, and another way to look at it is like this, like let's just say that this one on the left is your cash and life insurance. And this is your loan balance, right? Obviously, this is not going to be equal here, but because some people say like, okay, well, you just pay $12,000, and look, you only have 6,000 you freed up. But most people again forget that the other side here, like
Yeah.
let's just say that I brought 50,000. Like I said, there's 100,000 in here.
You're getting all the benefits of life insurance over there.
Yeah, I'm getting the benefits of life insurance, and let's just say, to your point, let's just say we net 5%. Well, that next year, I now have 105.
Yeah.
The next year after that, because it compounds, now I'm 110 and change, like 200 or something like
Yeah.
that, right? So yeah, maybe my balance is 44,180, and you
Mhm.
said, oh, it's only 6,000, but yes, my total cash gained another 10,000. So as I paid 12,000 back in, I've actually got 16,000, not even adding my own premiums, right? Because
Mhm.
people would argue, well, it's just because you're paying more money in. Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. But even if you don't factor that in at all, let's just say you stop paying premiums, you're
It's
just
still
letting it
gonna
grow.
compound.
It's still, I got now, $16,000 that I can invest,
Mhm.
and then use again to do the same thing like I was doing over here or whatever it
Mhm.
might be. And so I think this is the key point. When I've run the numbers, in as much as the investment does earn, I'd say better than the interest rate that you're paying on the loan, I think it makes sense.
Okay.
And I would even say significantly more. So if I'm paying at 6%, I would want at least 7 or 8% return
Mhm.
to create that spread
Mhm.
to keep the money from compounding against me.
Right.
Where I see it being a problem, erase all this.
Or you could just scroll down if you wanted.
Oh, there we go. Look at that.
Work smart, not hard,
I know. It's like I'm used to the old school, like you just got to
Yeah.
erase everything on a whiteboard, right? So like many people have, I do know some people out there that talk about using this for rental properties.
Mhm.
Now, if you would have said this 5 years ago, yeah, I mean, that property in Memphis, I put $32,000 down, but my profit on that was about over $300 a month, right? So it was almost like a 1% return per month or a 12% per year cash on cash. Now it's like $800 a month net profit, which is awesome, right? But the problem I see is a lot of people say, oh yeah, you should do it on properties. Well, let's just say that I had the same $50,000, right? For a down payment. So I'm buying like a $250,000 property, but let's just assume that maybe my cash on cash is only 4%. So that means I'm only earning $200 a month on this, or $2,400 a year. Oops, that's supposed to be per month. Well, as we mentioned before, if this was at 6% that we're borrowing, we got $3,000. Well, guess what? I'm only earning
Yeah, your activities.
$2,400.
Yeah.
And I even know a guy that he's not even an insurance guy. Like he's literally like, he does loans. He's like, this is the best thing ever because there's appreciation,
Yeah.
right? And I've been saying for a few years now, I was like, I would not bank on appreciation with properties right now at all. I mean,
Wouldn't either.
you might get a little, But short term,
It's not a great strategy. It's like, hey, I'm losing money every single month for the hope to exit. It's like, hey, if
yeah,
you're gonna do that, why not just invest in private equity and hopefully
right.
the ones that because it's not like you're gonna make a million times X your money. It's just like that's
Yeah.
just so it's just like yeah, I would not. I don't get excited about something like this,
Oh, no.
but yeah, this you could even make this work make sense on paper if the house in itself appreciated.
Right. I mean, if it appreciates, great. But I made that mistake in 2006, 2007, and 8,
Hmm.
and that didn't
It
go
didn't
so
work so
great.
well. You mean houses don't go up every single
It's
year?
weird.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, they usually do.
yeah.
But especially right now with the affordability crisis that's going on, I really, there's always pockets in the country that could be the exception. But I think the vast majority of places you look, you won't see the prices going up. And so that, I believe that always thinking you're always going to have appreciation is a big, big gamble, a big risk to take. Not to mention, like, say you're getting $2,400. You're like, oh, that's great. I'm making that per year. Yeah. But what if you have maintenance issues,
Exactly. Well, and then
tenants?
on the other side, your loan
Yeah.
is actually compounding.
It is. That's right. And so when people say like, well, where does that not make sense? Or it sounds too good to be true. Well, there are situations where it would not be too good to be true. It is if you use it the right way. It seems too good to be true, but it's actually just, it makes sense. But here it
Mhm,
doesn't. This is why also I don't go and borrow from my policy to go buy a car
mhm.
because I literally just got a car loan at
Yeah,
3.7%. If I can get the money from the bank, their
exactly.
money, not
Yeah,
mine,
yeah.
why not use that? Because that's the thing that drives me nuts about a lot of the traditional independent bankers. They try to say, "Oh no, it's better. Like you buy all your cars, buy all your houses using this policy." And I know you've had people on the
Mhm,
show say the same thing, but you're like, "Yeah, but I got to call bull on that. If I can, I'm always paying interest
mhm.
to these guys, insurance company or a bank. Otherwise, why would I just go with the insurance company? Other than maybe a peace of mind knowing I don't have to make a payment,
Yeah.
that makes sense." But when I know that I can get a better interest rate or even a similar interest rate using the bank's money versus my own money, I'm going to do that all day long. And then the cash I have in my policy, I can then use for things like this
Mhm.
that actually do make sense.
So let me ask this. So let's say you're borrowing at 6% and you can get an 8% loan.
Yeah.
It's like solid. The devil's advocate in me would say, well, I still would, if I am going to deploy capital into the 8% investment, yes, on paper it makes sense, but I value liquidity and control more than that delta.
Yeah.
And so for someone like me, I'm still going to say no, not because the
Mhm.
math doesn't work, but because I would rather go for something higher and
Yeah.
I'm okay foregoing that money that I could be earning.
Yeah.
It goes back to what we said earlier about the power of being liquid.
That's right.
But everyone's got a different value of what that is. How do you help people measure that? Like for me, let's say it's 15%, meaning like
Hmm.
I really don't have any interest deploying capital if I can't make
Yeah.
15%. I was given a deal that was pretty much bulletproof,
Yeah.
someone I knew, but it was a 12% rate of return.
Uh huh.
And I know some people watching this would be like, man, I would 12%. I'm not
Yeah.
going to say it's risk free, but it was pretty much risk free.
Yeah.
Reason I wasn't very interested in it, I just explained to them like I don't really
Hmm.
personally,
Yeah.
I'm talking about myself, don't want to deploy capital, tie up money at 12%
Hmm.
when I could be earning a lot more in other areas. And
Yeah.
they understood that. They thought I was like, oh man, that's tough. But I was just like, you know, this is going to be a year lockup, which is
Yeah.
not that long, but I always assume the worst. I'm like, you're
Yeah.
saying a year. I'm assuming 3.
Uh huh.
And it's like, would I be frustrated if I locked up $100,000 at 12%?
Right.
Many people would take that in a heartbeat. For me, I would actually rather keep my money in a life insurance policy,
Yeah.
earning a lot less, but it's
Right.
there, but I have liquidity.
Yeah.
And like that power of liquidity is allowing me to potentially make moves.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean,
How do you determine how would people determine what they say yes to and what they say no to?
it always comes back to this every time. And this is why it's an individual thing because yours might be 15%. But it's always about stewardship. Like, what could you be doing with that money,
Hmm.
right? Or what other opportunities do you have?
Yeah.
Like you said, some people say, I wish I could get 12% a
Hmm.
year, right? And that's totally true for some people, for a lot of people, really.
Hmm.
I would say most Americans would say, I'll take 8,
Yeah.
I'll take 8%. And they're totally valid and right because what they would do with that money, if they were trying to do higher returns, they might probably find the gambles, not the real returning ones,
Sure.
and lose money, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like whether somebody should pay off their house.
Hmm.
Like for the most part, I think you can get a low interest rate on a house. Why pay it off early?
Yeah.
But if someone's an unwise steward of their money,
Yeah. Locking up your
yeah,
money in your home could be one of the best things in the world.
yeah, get it
Yeah.
out of your hands because you're a horrible steward, right?
Yeah.
It might hurt, but that's the case. And some people will even justify the 401k because they're like, no, I know I can't get to it. Now, does that do them any good in the financial crisis? No, not really. I mean, you can
Sometimes you are
borrow.
your greatest liability, though. And for
Yeah.
so many people, if you're going to gamble or if you're going to spend that money, lock it up.
Yeah.
I mean, Ted Benna, I've had him on my show a couple times.
Mhm.
He said his favorite feature of the 401k is it makes it hard to access your money.
Right.
And I laughed inside because I was like, I see that as a negative.
Yeah.
And yet that's such a positive for so many people. And
Mhm.
they're not watching this because if you're like
Yeah.
watching this lame conversation with us, you're not like everybody else that you're just like, yeah, like most of America would find this very boring.
Mhm.
People that are watching this really want to go deep, and
Yeah.
we don't have to necessarily worry about them, blowing money on something shiny or
Yeah.
like going on a trip or something.
Most of our
So
followers are people that were like Dave Ramsey poster children that said,
yeah.
I want more than that,
And I actually admire Dave Ramsey a ton because
Yeah.
he's building people that are thinking long term, and it's
Mhm.
like the idea of paying cash for things, like you have to create discipline, which I
Yeah.
love.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if there's anything good about what he teaches, it's usually the first few baby steps. Ignore the later ones. So they talk about how to create wealth,
Mm-hmm.
but those first ones, yeah, he's incredible about that. And I think that's why, yeah, you're right. If you're watching this episode right now, you're not doing this because you're saying, "Man, I'm the worst spender in the world. I'm going to blow it." You're probably saying, "I want to learn how to become a better steward
You
of my
want to
money."
learn how to maximize. So
Yeah.
let me draw some things out and
Yeah.
ask you some questions.
You
So
bet.
if you have, all right, here we go. So if you're making money,
Mhm.
okay, you can save it, and then you can consume it.
Mhm.
So obviously, if we're working with people, obviously you want to be clear on what you're doing. Obviously, making money is really important, but once you have money, it's only able to do two things.
Mhm.
And obviously, we're talking about saving money. And what I kind of do is I build you have like an emergency, an opportunity.
Yeah.
An emergency, we were talking, it could be 6 months, it could be 2 years.
Yeah.
Personally, call me crazy. I feel really good with 2 years.
Yeah.
Just like if I have this 2 years of emergency,
Mhm.
then everything up above this, I can very much think of like, okay, where am I going to deploy this capital?
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, I have the opportunity cost to deploy in my businesses,
Mhm.
alternative investments, which I get pitched all the time, which I love.
Mhm.
That's why I'm actually having more people that are talking about other investments on this channel, not to give investment advice, but just to show people that there's opportunities out there,
Yeah.
just to open their eyes. And then, those are the main two. I dollar cost average into Bitcoin and crypto, but we won't even include that. So, and so for me, you talked about stewardship.
Mhm.
The things that I'm looking at when I'm looking to deploy money is I'm looking at the value of being liquid. So I have that, and this is where it's like, I don't know what that number is. It's more of an intuition of like
Yeah.
15%, but I would love to hear your thoughts on like how I actually can get to this number, because I'm sure there's a framework.
Yeah.
And then for me, I'm over here, I'm thinking risk
Mhm.
and risk of getting my money back. I liked what you
Yeah.
said about it's the return of money, not just on your money.
Yeah.
I like how I want to make sure I get my money, and then obviously I want to make something in addition. But like the rule of thumb is, if I'm going to deploy capital, I'm looking at two things. I'm looking at control cost, which my control cost is the cost of controlling money. So
Yeah.
in your example, it's 6%.
Mhm.
So this is like the actual cost. And so I need to make sure, if I'm going to pay 6% to control capital, I need to make sure that the opportunity over here is much greater than 6%.
Absolutely.
And so for me, maybe at a minimum, it's 8%. And
Mhm.
this makes sense on paper. But for me, my buy box is going to be, I don't want to go through the work, vetting and all, if I don't think there can be an opportunity for me to make
Sure.
15%.
Yeah.
Which might mean I just stack cash and invest in businesses that I
Yeah.
really understand.
Right.
And maybe the market's not going to perform super well, and so I need to lower my expectations. But
Yeah.
that works for me. Talk to me about like how talk to me about this and your thoughts around, like, is there questions that you would ask me, things that you would challenge me on? How can we go about helping people build their own framework on figuring out how much they should save up for an emergency? What should be their stewardship opportunity
Hmm.
cost number? I would love in real time to actually figure out how we come up with this opportunity cost number if 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 you think we could come up with that, and then
Uh-huh.
how you factor in risk, because you have to always factor in risk. Anything that's not guaranteed, like insurance, you're going to factor in risk. And so
Yeah.
you have to factor that in.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're a high income earner or own a successful business, you're already creating real value in the world. The real question is, are you keeping that money, protecting it, and growing it the way that actually supports your long-term goals? At BetterWealth, we help people like you better keep, protect, and grow their wealth through various tax strategies, estate planning, specially designed life insurance, retirement planning, and even a fractional family office service. If you're interested in one or more of the areas we can serve and want to learn more, the next step is to book a free clarity call with us. Click the link in the description or tag comment below to get started. Back to the video.
Yeah. So framework wise, I mean, even when you said like when it comes to like your intuition,
Yeah.
that's one thing I actually do take very seriously because I believe there is a spiritual component there that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we feel or sense things that maybe our logical minds or even just the logical world, well, sometimes the world's logical, but in that world that you can see doesn't make sense. You know, I used to teach that to people when I used to teach people how to trade stocks and options, right? I would say, I was like, investing 101 is you look at the charts, you make sure the fundamentals are good and they're in your watch list of the stocks that you're going to watch. And then based on the technicals, based on what the little ups and downs are doing, you're going to know when to buy. But I said, here's the 202 part is if all of a sudden you feel like something doesn't feel right, even though it says buy, something feels off.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do it. I would say like when in doubt, stay out, right? Also on the flip side, maybe you're thinking there's nothing wrong with this, but I feel like I should sell. That also should be taken seriously. I did that with some rental properties where, even though, it was doing great, it was making lots of money, it was just got that feeling. It's like, you know what, let's just get out of them. And that was right around the time that things were selling pretty well. It wasn't just maybe several months later, the market got harder. It's more of a buyer's market than a seller's market at that point, So, I've noticed that intuition is important. So if you say 2 years, there might be a reason. It might very well be that you need 2 years, and there might be an instance where you'll realize you need those 2 years.
Yeah.
Or maybe that 2 years ends up being because you can take care of your family, but then maybe some opportunity does come up and you said, man, my opportunity fund's already gone. It's already invested in business, investments, wherever it might be, but I need more.
Yeah.
Or I need more cash because the bank's going to come in with money, but I'm going to need to show more assets or more liquidity. So then they'll give me that loan. And that's the thing is it's hard because it's not like a hard, firm, logical framework.
Mm-hmm.
But from my experience, it's taught me that that's the thing that's difference between successful and unsuccessful people, right? I mean, it's the same reason why Warren Buffett, he says no to almost everything because it has to feel right. If you kind of mentioned this earlier, right? If it's not a heck yeah, don't do it, in business, in life, with a lot of things. And so many of us, because we think there's a scarcity of opportunity, scarcity of time, scarcity of money, we say yes to things that we know we shouldn't.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to bring on more people, is I want people to know that there's abundance of options out there.
That's
I think
right.
the downfall of that is, people will watch one episode and be like, oh, this is it. And you're like, no, please don't. But I can't, again, I've done the whole cycle of like, I can't control what people do. And I need to do my very best to share the good, the bad, the ugly, try to be as honest as possible, and people will do what they want to do. So, okay. So another thing that I mentioned that I saw in what you were drawing up here is the money that you're putting back, all of it's going towards the policy.
Yeah.
Until the policy's paid off. I like that because it's, again, you're ensuring that your return of money is first and foremost.
Yes.
After you get that, let's say you pay off the loan and now you're cash flowing, in this example, $500 a month.
Yeah.
What does Chris do with that money? Do you increase your lifestyle? Do you start a new life insurance policy? Do you divvy it up to say, hey, we're gonna increase? Like, how do you your policy's already your policy loan's already paid off, and now it's kicking off cash flow.
Yeah.
And you also have that underlying still 50 grand in the
Right.
deal. So
That's
now
right.
you have your 50 grand in the deal. It's kicking off cash flow.
Yeah.
How do you go about the first world problem of where you put their money?
Yeah. I see it the same as if somebody was just taking that money, put it into savings, right? The reason why we do that strategy is because we know we can build a little bit more interest by doing that, right? By paying simple interest while we're compounding interest, we can pick up some extra interest dollars along the way to then help us speed up the process. Because what most people, the people that would be critics of using this method would say, well, why go through all that problem? I just use a savings account, take that 500 a month, put it in my savings and build it back up. But if you do the math, you look at the interest on even if it's a money
Yeah.
market account making 1%, yay. Even if you do that math, you say, well, yeah, but over several years, it
Yeah.
really doesn't add that much interest.
Right.
And that's what people don't realize. They think, oh, it's growing a lot. No, it's really not. It's really not doing much, at least with those kind of small numbers. It looks better with bigger ones, right? And so when I use that policy, yeah, I might get to the point where it's paid off. Well, it's no different because then the question is am I going to use the loan again? Am I going to get another policy? I may or may not. I might just cycle the money through and just keep doing it again and again.
Hmm.
I might get another policy. I mean, I will buy convertible terms sometimes just to get a bigger death benefit for my family's protection, and then also have the option to convert later on without having to requalify my health. But again, money's always moving, right? It's always in motion that way. However, it's circumstantial too. It depends on where you are and what's going on in the marketplace, right? Because just like I said, like before, it made sense. Even a few years ago, I was just keep cycling that money through my policy. But now lately, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm going to start storing more, not like pay those loans off, have less of a balance, if any at all, store a lot more cash and not use it for investments. And just, whatever cash I have in my bank account, get it out, get that money out, get that invested, and then build up all this liquid net worth inside my policy where I know I'm going to get paid better than the bank anyway, especially as the rates have come back down again. So that's based on market. But if things switch again, maybe bank savings start paying more, maybe I do something different. Maybe high yield savings account more. Maybe I use my life insurance. It's always dependent upon the market. So I wish there was like an easy answer, but the easy answer just comes back to what's the best use of my money right now.
Yeah.
And for some people, like I get clients that they are building up their cash flow. They're going to get to a point and they're saying, well, now I'm going to switch from, really the hustle mode and accumulation, of assets and trying to build up that cash flow to the point where they say, now I have enough. I am work optional. Do I keep working or do I not? Because if they keep working, they probably want to get more policies to be able to do more, especially they have all this passive income coming in too. Now they got their money they're already saving plus passive income.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're going to need more policies, and that's inevitably going to happen, right? But on the flip side, if they all of a sudden say, all right, I'm going to stop my job now. Now I don't have that income coming in. Now I'm going to live off that income. Well, now we're not going to get more policies because now we're living off the income.
Right.
So it's always situational, but it always comes back to, all right, where are you right now? And do you need that money? Do you not? Do we grow and store it? Are you in the accumulation phase or are you in the phase of distribution, right? Where you're starting to live off that money.
Yeah. I love it, man. What other questions should I ask you? I feel like this is a lot fun to draw out kind of how you view your life insurance and how you invest.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about my framework of how I get people work optional.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
So yeah, there's 5 phases we take people through. And of course, I'm going to butcher like what the names of these phases because I always forget, right? For me, it's just like in my head, but people are like, you should name it something. I'm like, okay, cool. So the first phase right here is really we're capturing money. We're finding the low-hanging fruit, right? So like even when we take people through our coaching process outside of life insurance, right? When we're getting bigger now, like this is like the overall financial freedom plan. We try to figure out like, where do we capture it? This is where we start addressing cash flow. Do you have cash flow leaks? Do we have assets sitting there that aren't doing anything, right? I'll give you an example. We were looking at one client. They hired us because they said, we got 5 million, mostly in Meta and Google. So in some of the big tech companies, $5 million in those stocks. They said we should probably be more diversified. So we want to diversify some into real estate. And so you think that would be easy. It's like, great, let's look at your 5 million. Where can we put that money? But instead we said, well, let's look at your cash flow first. And so we analyzed everything from their income and expenses, their balance sheet to see where everything is. And we started to look at it. We realized, hey, do you know, without spending any of your money yet, we could actually refinance your mortgage, consolidate some of these loans, even though they were making hundreds, like 400,000 or 500,000 a year. You still had different loans. They're like, oh, who cares? We make 30,000 plus a month, right? So we're good. Well, I said, well, what if we refinanced your home, pay off some of these loans will actually free up $3,800 a month. And it wasn't just they had a high interest rate, nothing like that. It was just because the loan was so old, we could just refinance, get a very low rate at that time. It was a few years ago before the rates went back up again. And so I was like, let's just do that. So we freed up $3,800 a month. That's $45,000 a year without a dime out of their pocket. And then we looked at taxes. We said, we should probably have you talk to our CPA because it looks like you might be paying a little bit too much on your taxes compared to your income. That was confirmed. The CPA said we can save you over $30,000 a year. So even before you even started doing anything with the investing, which is what they wanted, I said, let's address what you need, right? Which is let's free up the cash flow. And it's also reducing their expenses, right? It's really, when it comes down to it, like you have income, right?
Yep.
That you want. And then you have expenses. The ideal is, you get that passive income up over that number, right?
Yeah. But if you're lowering expenses.
But if you lower expenses down here, well, that makes it easy and easier, right?
Yeah. It's like a double whammy.
Yeah. So that's where he said, like, let's just do that. And then I saw that they had a rental property. I said, well, that's how much you making cash flow? 0 per month net. I said, oh, but you got 200,000 of equity. That's a horrible return on your equity. Let's sell that property, 1031 tax-free exchange into another property where that one will pay you about like $2,000 a month. And so already before we even got to it, it was like, oh, that's about $100,000 a year of cash flow we can improve upon, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Then we said, great, now you can invest with the stocks or figure out what to do with that. And they decided to do some different stuff with it where really, I mean, if they just took $2 million, right? $2 million earning 10% is $200,000 a year plus the $100,000 we already freed up, that's $300,000 difference. They still have $3 million they can leave in their, their Google and Meta stocks if they want to leave them or not, So that's kind of what we look at right from the get-go. It's like, let's analyze that. Let's see if there's something missing. Then we move into the, the kind of the explore, like we really like start to look, oh my goodness, that's the worst X in the world. There we go. Start to explore opportunities. So, because again, we're not financial, investment advisors in that sense. We're not like saying, hey, you should put your money here, put it there. But I do have a lot of people say, where do you have money with, or who would you trust? And so we always tell them, like, listen, disclaimer, we're not investment advisors. We're not telling you to do any of these investments. Do your own due diligence as well. But here's some people that I've done some due diligence on that you can continue that due diligence to see if it's a good fit for you. Right. And so I have connections that way. And I don't take anything on the back end, like people will say like, oh, I guess you're getting paid. No, I don't take anything on the back end because that's the easy way to lose your licenses and get sued.
That's right.
So we start exploring opportunities. And a lot of times what we'll do is we'll try and narrow it down because say, for example, their goal is like, I've had a couple that were younger and they said, honestly, we love cash flow, but we really don't need the income because we're going to plan to keep working for a while. If this money grows and then becomes cash flow later, we're okay with that. Okay, well, that's a whole nother set of investments that do that. Like oil and gas could be one of those, or there's some things with like land and things like that where it can cash flow later, but it might take a good 4 or 5 years to really build it up. Cool. Maybe we look at those options versus cash flowing now. Or I get other people to say, I want cash flow from day one.
Right.
Great. Well, that's some of these options over here. Let's do that. So we start exploring those options. And so we take it, we kind of, take it from here, like where there might be like 20 different options to like maybe 3 to 5.
Yeah, fine. 3 to 5.
That they have there. And then they got to commit, right? This is where they take action. So once they start to explore the option, they start talking with, having the conversations with people. They even ask us like, hey, come on, you're not paid by them. You're paid by us. What do you think is bad? We can kind of tell them, hey, here's the honest truth in your situation. Maybe this makes sense, maybe not. Yeah. Don't put all your eggs here. Make sure you spread it out, right? So they start to commit. This is where like the real, the passive income really begins, right? Here, this is where we make sure we protect because as you're growing your assets, we also want to make sure we protect it. You got to have the defense going with the offense. Yeah, life insurance is part of that too, but do you have, what about health insurance? Because one of the number one fears we have of people is saying, well, if I quit my job, how am I going to have health insurance? Not realizing that they've been brainwashed so much that they have to have a job to get health insurance. Like, no, there's plenty of options, whether it's the marketplace, there's even other like, health share options, things like that. Like, my family pays just over $400 a month for ours because if I went on the Obamacare plan, I'm paying close to $2,000 a month, So, I do different stuff that way. But, how do we protect you, legally? How about having the right corporations or entities in place, especially if you get sued or even for tax purposes when you're trying to do some of these investments and things like that. So really building that wall of protection and upgrading as you go along, right? Whether you're dealing with CPAs or attorneys or whatever. And then this last one is kind of fun, which is at this point, now we're kind of creating what I refer to as like an income avalanche, right? where in this point, this is where you start to really like, double down on some of the investments you really start to like and start to do more of in those areas, maybe start doing others. So really we're just reinvesting the cash flow. So you're compound instead of trying to compound interest, you try to compound income. And this is one that's the hardest
I
for
like it.
people
Yeah.
because a lot of people are thinking like, oh, like this is like watching grass grow. And like it is. It really is. But this is the fun part because, we're not just trying to compound your interest like some people do. They'll put away for decades and hope that it works. No,
Mhm.
we're literally taking your income, reinvesting that, keep saving it with the money you're already saving. This is where a lot of people stop funding their 401ks, add that money with the money they're earning on their investments. And that just gets them to do it faster and faster and
And
faster.
how fast, on average, can you get someone to replace their expenses?
Depends on where they're starting from. I mean, we get a lot of people that sometimes they could take over 10 years. Like they're starting with just a few 100,000, but they want to have like, you know, 10, 15, 20,000 a month and they're not saving a whole lot. It could
Yeah.
take a lot longer. We get other people where, I talked to this one couple recently. They had, about $2 million in their retirement accounts. And their whole goal was to have about, 15 to 20,000 a month. So
Mm.
roughly 200,000 a year. They kept asking their Vanguard advisor, they're saying, okay, when can I stop? Because the oldest, I was going to say the oldest dad,
Yeah.
the oldest husband it was 59. He just turned
Okay.
59 and a half.
Okay.
His wife's 55. He's saying, okay, when can I stop? And the Vanguard advisor's like, not giving him a specific answer.
Right.
There's no answer. And I had to tell both him and his wife, I said, well, the reason is because it's kind of depressing. Because if he were to give you the answer, because most advisors realize it's not a 4% rule anymore, it's a 3%, especially in your
Okay.
60s.
Yeah.
If you're 70, it is a 4% rule, but you have to wait till you're about 70 before that, because people are living longer for that number to still work out with market ups and downs. And so it's 3%. Well, if you want to have, let's say, 200,000 a year, pull out 3%, well, that means you got to have roughly about $7 million. And you can see both him and his wife's face fall.
Yeah, that's depressing.
Because he's like, hey, we have 1.9 million. She had 600,000 in her retirement plan.
Mhm.
And they're like, well, there's no way we're going to get 7 million. I said, well, that's why the advisor probably doesn't want to tell you, keep saving, keep working.
Yeah.
And even the guy says, he's like, I don't mind working till 70. I just don't want to feel like I have to,
Yeah.
and I told him, I said, well, here's the good news. You have 2 million in retirement accounts. If you earn 10% a year, how much is that? 200,000 a year. I'm like, you could in the next year or two, if we're trying to give you a little buffer and even go
Yeah.
higher, next year 2 or 3, get you there.
Now, in this example, are they paying significant taxes and fees getting that money out their retirement
They
account?
could be, unless we self-direct it,
Okay.
and then even then, if you pull off income, of course, you're going to get
It'd be
taxed. But
ordinary. Yeah.
yeah, you can roll over into a self-directed IRA and then just invest in these same kind of opportunities and deals. The only ones we'd say not to, and that's why there's always a strategy and a plan involved because say, for example, there are some tax benefits to some of these investments, like buying a rental property has a lot of tax benefits where you don't really pay any taxes on that, at least not usually. Oil and gas can have some tax benefits too, right? So depending on where they invest, we might say, well, let's not do that from the IRA. Maybe we do cash them out. Maybe we do pay some taxes and then use that there. And if we do pull money out, are there things that we can do to offset it? Like, could we do a certain investment where you can write off a good chunk of it? There are some investments that you might get a upfront tax benefit in the beginning, or something like that. So there's a lot of ways to look at it.
So the framework is capture the cash flow,
Mhm.
explore opportunities,
Commit.
commit,
Yeah.
allocate your money, and then protect.
Yep.
Is there a reason why protect is number 4 and not sooner? Is it just the idea is like once you get moving, you want to make sure you're protecting yourself along the way?
Well, it's kind of, I've realized like over time with doing the process, I mean, we've done this with hundreds and hundreds of clients. It's almost like natural when people get to the point they commit money, then it's kind of that grass growing phase and they get a little bit bored. So it kind of creates the mental space for them to say, all right, what's next?
Yeah.
Like I'm waiting, I'm watching. Great. While you're doing that,
Protect yourself.
let's protect yourself. And it's always the least sexy part for people because a lot of them are like, oh, I just want to make money. It's like, I get it. But
Yep.
what's the point of making all this money if it'd be taken away with one life event?
Right. And so then you're saying, like, let's say early on, I'm able to create $5,000 a month, but my
Yeah.
goal is $20,000 a month. You would
Right.
say instead of spending that 5 grand,
Mhm.
you're going to now reinvest into
Mhm.
other assets that can get myself to that $20,000. So
Right.
when you say the avalanche,
Mhm.
explain why you say avalanche because a lot of times people
Mm.
say that's way of paying off debt is the avalanche avalanche strategy. So
Yeah.
explain that for our viewers.
Yeah. Well, and it's probably because I watched a lot of cartoons as a kid, and you always think about like, that cartoon character that like falls down the mountain and becomes a big snowball, just keeps getting bigger and
Mhm.
bigger, creates like an avalanche with them. So yeah, let's talk about that. Like, so I'm going to use, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I'll take this client, for example, right? So this client, she had $600,000 to invest. Now, in the first year, we were able to get her going pretty well. She got to about like 5,500 a month, right? Oh
Oh,
my goodness.
the best drawing yet.
I know. You can't tell my mom was a professional
Yeah.
artist, right? So yeah, that's like 5,500 per month. Now, for her goal was about 6,500 a month. Now, this is a pretty short example. It doesn't take long, but she was also saving roughly about 30,000 a year. So you think that 5,500 a month, that's about 66 plus the 30,000. It gives her now 96,000 more
Yeah.
to invest, right? Well, if that 96,000 makes 10%, that means she makes an extra 9,600 a year. Oops. So, I mean, obviously, like the 5,500, she's trying to get to,
Is there in a
roughly,
year, essentially.
yeah, exactly. Because now, like that gets added on. That's, what is that, roughly 800 a month, right? Now she's at 6,300 per month, year two.
Yeah, I just have to remind, like, this is all good until, like, the underlying investments are the real value here, and you're
Right.
saying you have access to a bunch that you vetted
Hmm.
that you can all give people to look at?
Right.
Okay.
And it's not guaranteed for sure,
Yeah.
but it's kind of funny because, yeah, even if, like, let's just say that 25% of our money loses, right?
Mhm.
Usually it's not that much. I'd say less than 10% of our deals, even the last 3 years, which have been the worst real estate market we've seen, still, even then, that 400,000, still that 400,000 making 10% is still 40,000 a year.
Mhm.
Remember that 600,000, if you're looking at traditional financial advisors, right? Pulling out 3% a year
Yep.
only equals 18,000 a year. So even when we've had some clients say, "Ooh, that apartment building did not go well. I ended up losing my money in that deal." Well, because we're not trying to have them put all their money in one place, put all their eggs in one basket. That's why we usually require a minimum of like 150 to 200 grand even to work with us, because we want them to make sure they're diversified, not just saying, "I'm all in. I hope this works." Right? That's the worst place to be. But even then, like they said, "Wow, I like lost about 20% of my money, but it's still working."
Yeah.
Like I had a client that way recently where she was so bummed she lost 300,000 in a deal. And I said, "Oh," and I was wondering like maybe she doesn't have anything left. No, she still had like 1.2 million working for her,
Mhm.
kicking off like $8,000 a month,
Yeah, and you
you
just
know?
you went back, and I think that's also key is if you reverse engineer from the cash flow that's being created and you look
Mhm.
at what their phantom net worth could be in a
Yeah.
traditional way, I find that that could be a really interesting mental model
Oh
to
yeah.
think through. Yeah,
Absolutely. So that's really what we do is just we just keep helping people do that and stay disciplined. That's why you
yeah,
said like it really does require discipline,
yeah.
especially it's a great way of a saver can go from a saver to what I refer as a steward.
Okay.
Because, most people think it's just spenders and savers, right? Spenders just blow their money and they hyper focus on the income, but they ignore the expenses.
Mhm.
Savers ignore the income, but hyper focus on the expenses,
Yeah,
right? They're always looking at the expenses. Well, a steward says, let's look at both.
yeah.
Let's look at my income and expenses, the full financial picture here. How am I doing as a steward? Am I keeping my expenses in a reasonable control? Am I finding ways to produce more income and create more value so that that can continue to grow and build my stewardship?
Mm,
That's what a steward does. It's a very abundant way of looking at money where spenders and savers both have a very scarcity point of view
yeah.
because savers can never save enough. They never feel like it's enough. That's why they just keep hoarding and saving. Just
Mm,
like that couple that had 1.9 million, in
mhm.
his retirement account. He said, "I'm worth $3 million and my cash flow is $300 a month from a couple rentals that I have," which by the way had 800,000. So I
Yeah,
said, "Man, when we go back and we go to phase one,
yeah.
we're going to be looking at that saying, okay, that 800,000 of equity producing 300 a month, that's not even a 0.5% return on your equity. We could put that in a CD and do a better job,
Mhm.
right? Let's find better ways to use that money so that we can actually improve your situation without even having to invest all of it,
Yeah, that's
right?"
good. That's good. I love it. And your book, they can learn all about it. They get your book,
Yep. The work optional
and
blueprint talks about
we'll
that.
have the link down below. Chris, thank you. This was fun. Really appreciate you, and look forward to seeing what the future holds.
Same. Thank you.
I only went for a day, and that was my biggest regret because people start to see something in themselves they haven't seen before.
I'm just so grateful.